So when I started grad school, I was like just coming, and I'd traveled very little, and that was my first time in Texas. And we were looking for a field site, and I didn't even speak English all that well, but we were in like this like open shrub savanna, and nature was calling, so I had to go pee. And so I went behind a juniper and I opened my zipper and crashed down, and I realized between my legs was a juvenile rattlesnake.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with somebody I'm really excited to talk to because she is an expert in all things relating to bugs and agriculture and stuff like this. Today we have Marion Le Gall. How's that? Did I say it right?
Yeah, this sounds good.
We have somebody, she is originally hails from France and has then moved to various places in Texas, but you've traveled a lot. Where have all the places that you've traveled for in your research?
Okay, so I started in Brittany in France, and my first move for work was actually going from Brittany to Tours in the Loire Valley, where I got a master in biology, but I went there because there is an institute on insect research biology. From there on, I moved to Texas. And when I was in Texas, I was lucky enough to do like some training in Peru. So I got lucky enough to visit the Amazon forest, which was incredible. And then after that, I went to the cornfield of Pennsylvania. Very exciting, working on slugs. And following that, I finally I moved to like Phoenix, where I'm currently are, like more precisely Tempe, and I'm at Arizona State University. And there I've been lucky to go to like Africa, West Africa, and Australia for work. So it's been
wow. So you actually got up close and personal with some very like dangerous kind of insects, like in Australia. What was that like? Were there like, what kind of bugs did you run into that were dangerous?
Well, so actually right by the station where I was staying, there were ant nests, and the genus is called Myrmecia, and they call like bull ants. And they're not the bullet ants from the Amazon, they're different genus, but they're actually way more dangerous. It's probably one of the most venomous insects on the planet, because like a lot of people are very allergic to it. And so like some people have actually died from the stink of Myrmecia. And so I was trying to be very cool because they were like, the nest was right by the station. So I took a video, and eventually I saw one on my feet, and they're very aggressive and started running. So I have like this video, it's hilarious. Like the camera starts shaking and you hear me like, no. But yes, I saw those, which are pretty cool. I also had the PhD students I was with got chased by a daddy emu. So like the birds, because the dad actually take care of the chick, and they're very protective. So you get chased by an emu, which was really funny. We got kangaroo jumping in the road in front of us. So we like hit a couple of kangaroos on our trip.
Oh,
but they were fine. They jumped over.
Oh, okay. All right. Good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Australia. When you hear about Australia, you just assume stuff like that happens. I got mugged by a koala at gunpoint. It happens. Really? No, it's just a joke.
He was probably like on drugs.
Yeah.
I heard there is a crisis on koala.
Really?
Yeah, like, you know, like they go really hard on the eucalyptus, and you know.
And then they're just out there being degenerates and stuff, making crime.
Yeah, they're really dangerous.
I mean, that's a lifestyle I can get behind. Just get high and just cause trouble. I like it. So you also have an expertise in locusts and stuff. What are some of the reasons that we have problems with locusts, and what does your research indicate that would be helpful fighting these little guys?
Yeah, so I guess probably like the best start is like, what is a locust? So, you know, like the saying about like every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle is a square. So that applies to locusts. So like every locust is a grasshopper, but not every grasshopper is a locust. So there is a lot of species of grasshoppers out there, but locusts are grasshopper that under certain conditions that are environmental, they switch from like being shy and solitary, kind of don't want to hang out with anyone, minding their own things and living the grasshopper life, to being like, we need to get together and start marching And after they start marching, they start flying, and then they become transboundary pests. And some species will change color. They completely change their behavior. It's just kind of crazy. And that's a locust. The locusts do that.
Do they get really aggressive with other creatures or with each other or stuff? Or
no, it's actually kind of the opposite. They started wanting to be together. They started like aggregate in mass and start marching. The problem is if you're a farmer and you have like a mass of locusts walking toward your field, there's nothing going to be left after that. And when they like eventually take to the air, because the adults have wings and the young one don't, when they take to the air, then they can like invade entire like region of the world, can suffer from outbreaks. So just as like for humans, it's just like from an economical standpoint, completely devastating. There's some studies that show that like kids that are born the year of a locust outbreak are less likely to go to school. So it has like very long lasting consequences on like livelihood.
Wow. And so your research, or what do we know about trying to solve problems with huge locust swarms?
So like one of the difficulty with locusts, and that is something that like my former boss, Ariane Sees, has been working hard on, is that because outbreaks are not every year, it depends on condition. It's often like linked to rain. So when there is like a very rainy years and plants abundance, it started being very numerous. And like because like the locust transition is density like dependent, that's usually when it happens. But that is not regular. Like for instance, in Argentina, there were like outbreak in 2020, I believe, and before that, it's been 60 years. So you can picture that like the government is not necessarily always like allocating money every year if there's nothing happening for 60 years. And also a lot of people have the knowledge to fight the locusts. They might have retired even by the time, that happens again. And so she has created a global locust initiative. And the idea is like, so like there is locusts happen all over the world. And so like the share the knowledge and like, so that becomes like available whenever like a outbreak happen. And also trying to work on like, it is less costly to keep a little bit of money on locust research and locust control, even when they're now outbreaking. And that's why, for example, Australia has an Australia Plague Locust Commission, because for them, they have realized that it's less expensive to spend some money every year than like wait for an outbreak to happen and then deal with the consequences of it.
Wow. Wow. Well, and the causation of this, could it be, in your professional opinion, is it wise to maybe start rethinking monocropping on this large scale? And is that to account for their food source?
So that one is poorly understood, but like there are things that would like maybe indicate that the way we are managing the land has influences. So some of the research that like Ariane did, for example, on the Mongolian locusts, it was in China, and she realized that like when the land was overgrazed, like the plants were low in nitrogen and protein, and like turned out that like the locusts were actually outbreaking. So we know that there is like interaction between the way we like using the lands. But like now for monoculture, it's a little bit more of a complicated story whether that has an impact, because it's more in grazing field that there might be an issue.
Interesting. So, and this has everything to do with animals that are there, and the nitrogen that comes from their poop kind of helps,
Yeah, it does. So like basically one thing. So if you are a vegan, like your friends are always going to ask you like, where do you get your protein from, right?
Tofu.
Because like, yeah, and where is tofu? What is tofu, right? It's like it's soy, right? And so it's a nitrogen fixer. But generally speaking, if you eat lettuce, if you eat grass, it's actually very low in protein. Like eating leaves is not going to like get you a lot of protein. So insects that are herbivores, they're pretty much vegan, right? And so like one of the dogma in biology is that most herbivore insects do better when you add nitrogen in the system. So if you add fertilizer on plants, usually herbivores respond positively. And we have found this very surprising thing that locusts do not follow that dogma. As a matter of fact, it's kind of actually the opposite. So we have a vegan that craves sugar. And so one thing we think is happening is we have a vegan that also run marathon, because like they are transboundary pests and they're actually capable of like flying very long distance when they're in the locust phase. And we know that for fueling those long flights, they actually use fats. And to get fat, you have to eat a lot of carbs. And so we think that's why the locusts are actually really carb hungry. So we've noticed that actually if you like can increase like the nitrogen content of plants, the locusts don't love that, and they don't really turn into locusts. They remain on the grasshopper stage.
Interesting. Wow. So
Yeah.
I didn't actually expect you to say that. That's really interesting. So, as far as what we can do, is there any use for these? If we can catch them and eat them, or what can we do with locusts that when they get outbroke? What do we do with these guys?
So that is one thing. So like there have definitely like been documentation of people eating locusts from the outbreak. The problem with that is nowadays, right, when there is a massive outbreak like the one that happened in East Africa in 2018, the only solution at that time is dumping ton and ton of pesticides. And obviously that has huge consequences for the environment. You know, it's dangerous for like applicator. It will kill like beneficial insects. It's terrible. But like the seriousness of the outbreak, that's the only quick solution. There's nothing that works fast enough. So then I would not recommend eating the locust, right? Because you don't know where they've been. You don't know what they've been through because they can fly up to 500 kilometers in the night. And so you don't know what they've been through. So they're not really like an insect that I would want to eat if I don't know where he was the night before.
Right. That's what they say about me. I don't know where he's been. Don't touch him.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
What's the life cycle of these little guys?
So that's the interesting thing too. Like depending on the condition, they can accelerate the life cycle, and that's what makes them like go crazy and create those outbreaks. So if there is a lot of food and enough food, they can like produce several generations in a year, and that's like this increases also in the number of generations that will create those massive outbreak. And for example, like in the outbreak I'm mentioning, the one in 2018, that's what happened. So like in the Arabian Peninsula, there was a lot more rain than usual. There were more food. And so the locusts produced more generation. And because that's an area that's geopolitically a bit difficult to monitor, that kind of happened without people really noticing because it was in Oman and places like that. And by the time they were like swarming and coming to East Africa, it was kind of already too late to do anything because really you have to act on it early on by monitoring the egg bed.
Wow. That's crazy. And you would need the biggest kind of insect net in the world to try to catch an entire cloud of these little guys and stop them from decimating crops. That's so amazing. I love what you do. You're so cool. You also spent some time researching on what Mediterranean geckos that were infected with these parasites called, help me say it,
pentastomes. So that one I don't have, like, I can talk about it, but like disclaimer, this is not my, I was a co-author and I helped. So I
you know more than me. Okay.
Okay. So that was a kind of a cool project. That was when I was a grad student. There was a lab at Texas A&M that worked on parasites, and they found that like the lung of the Mediterranean gecko has like those crustacean parasites in it. And they were wondering if there was a physiological cause. And I'm not a herpetologist and I'm not a parasitologist, but I knew how to do respirometry. Like I was trained on respiratory techniques. So like I know how to measure metabolic rates. So like how much CO2 an animal can expel and how much oxygen they can take. And so we're like, okay, well, like they're in the lungs. Is there a cost, for the gecko to have? So like their team collected a bunch of gecko and then dissected them. So like they knew the parasitic load. But before they dissected them, what we did is like we measured the metabolic rate. And nothing happened. We could not find a link between, like the metabolic rate and, the parasitic load. Then I was kind of thinking, I was like, yeah, but if you think about a smoker, if they're like just sitting on the couch, you're not going to know they're a smoker, but you put them on a treadmill and then maybe you're going to see something. So what we did is we put the gecko in a bucket and with a finger, we chased them till they were exhausted. And like they will at some point, they will stop moving and just kind of like plop around. And then we put them in like the respirometry. And what actually we saw is there were a relationship between the recovery time and the parasitic that were in the lung. So we were able to find that there were a metabolic cost of having those parasites in the lung, but it's only visible when they are like exerting themselves.
Oh my God.
Pretty cool.
And everybody out there who's listening, go and look up these pentastomes, right? Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Gross. Ugh.
So I didn't do any of the dissection. So again, as I said, like all the bulk of that work was done by like Jill Detwiller. She's now in Canada, but that was like her like That's our baby, that study. Like I just did the respirometry.
Shout out to the scientists out there in Canada, colleagues. But you're like, your specialty is like nutritional ecology, which means what? Like, what do little creatures eat, right?
Yeah, so like basically the question that like keep me up at night is like what are organisms eating? What happened when they eat the thing they do, and why do they want something like from nature? Like why a grasshopper like a plant over another one? Like is it gonna make it fat? Is it gonna make it like reproduce better? Yeah, how nutrients affect organism is really something that fascinates me.
And then in return, you would end up finding out something about like plant protection or like crop protection through that.
Yeah, so like unfortunately, like as an entomologist, I feel like I'm cursed because like basically all I try to do is to control the thing I love, right? And but like so like the idea for me is to use the nutritional preference against them. So then instead of dumping ton of chemical in the environment, we can change agricultural practice to like give them a meat match. So like we're not making them disappear from the environment, but we make them like a nappy enough that they're not there in high number.
Sure. And there's these things like some they are part of the food chain. Some people eat some of these insects, and so it's like when we poison mice, it's not really good for like the owls and stuff. So it's your approach is going to be probably the future in that sense. So you've also worked and studied and know a little bit about these guys I really don't like, which are the slugs. They're always in my garden, sliming around. What did you find about slugs?
So yeah, slug was after my PhD, I wanted to find a postdoc, which is like pretty much like some research you do for another university for like a short term, like usually a couple of years. And I was trying to convince myself that I was question driven and not organism driven. Although that's a lie. I absolutely love grasshopper. Tattooed on my arm. But anyway, so I found this position at Penn State, and it was with a lab that does normally entomology, and some of the students had done some work that I found like really remarkable. So I was like, that'd be a cool place to be. And so it turned out slugs are the most difficult pests to control in the Northeast because mosquicides are very expensive and they're water soluble. So usually slugs are present when it's like pretty humid, right? So like it's not ideal. There's no silver bullet for slug. So we're like, okay, well, let's try to see like if we can use nutrition against them. And we actually found something it's not a silver bullet, but it kind of does work. So farmers in Pennsylvania, when they are trying to do conservation agriculture, they have one practice that is called cover cropping. And so the idea of cover cropping is that you never keep the soil bare. And so what it does is like it prevents water runoff of chemicals. It prevents, like the topsoil to fly away with the wind. And it's just generally speaking, like you still have plant there. It helps with diversity, keep like natural enemy there. But also one thing we were thinking is like, well, if you have a monoculture and you have nothing else there, the slugs have nothing else to eat. And so if the plant is actually not ideal in terms of nutrition, they're going to eat more of it. And that's what we're thinking was happening with the corn, because I grab some slugs, grow some corn, and I realized that the slugs were actually losing weight. Like it wasn't ideal for them. But despite that, they're huge pest of corn. So we're like, well, what about if there is another plant in the field? And that's cover crop. The thing with cover crop is usually the farmers, before they plant the corn, they will kill the cover crop so there is no competition between the two plants. But we're like, what about they wait to kill? So like they actually plant the corn still in the living crop, because like most of the slug do the damage when the corn is very baby, or like the soybean, like they're like young seedling plants. And actually, if you have them in your garden, you'll notice like the young bulbs, like that's what they love eating. And so we're like, well, what about they wait for killing it and they actually like leave the cover crop in there a bit longer? And when they did that, we did find, in fact, that there was a lot less damage. So like that worked. And that was, same thing, like not using any mosquicide, no chemicals, just like keeping the cover crop in there a bit longer.
Just giving these insects an alternative to the thing that you want. Just divert them this other direction.
Yeah, but the other thing is like it's great for diversity. So like if you have more plants in the field than a monoculture, you'll have more natural enemy. There is a lot of other process that'll be better just by having diversity in your field. We have farmers that practice like several, like, rotation and have like several plants. And they have like amazing, beautiful diversity in the field, and they hardly have to use any chemicals.
Wow. So, I mean, once again, the idea of diversity, in your professional opinion, diversity all around is a good and healthy way to avoid pests and diseases.
Yeah, I feel like generally speaking, like there will be no debate about that. I think that one is like, we know that crop diversity increase insect diversity, which in turn will help like not an insect taking over, like because there'll be more competition among the insects and you will have more natural enemies. Yeah, that'll keep things in check a little bit. It's like the idea of copying what nature does already, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping that the idea of seeing diversity in agriculture work so well will come over to our social lives and with people and say, well, having all these diverse kind of people is actually helpful for us as well. I'm a big fan.
There's also data that support that. So for example, like if you look at like diversity in a lab, they have shown in science, so like the more diverse a lab is, the more productive they are. So we actually also, it works for a human.
Yeah. This is what I've kind of assumed all along, but I get people like you and I ask and I make sure that I'm not just crazy. So are there other insects that are on, your agenda that you want to study? Do you have some favorites? I know you like the grasshopper. What else really fascinates you?
I think all insects. So I'm a equal opportunity lovers when it comes to that. And like, I feel like I'm so fortunate living in Arizona. So if you go here at night in the desert, it's just like incredible. Like the cool bugs that we can find here, and not just insect. Like there is really cool arachnids, so like tons of scorpions, some pretty cool spiders out here. So like, yeah, I really, really happy with the desert life. It's pretty cool.
All right.
One thing that we have here that's cool is we have the Palo Verde beetle, which is probably like one of the largest beetle in North America. So like those guys are like massive, and like the grub will feed on the root of Palo Verde, which that part is not great, but it's just like a insanely big beetle, and it's pretty cool to find them.
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
I would say the Southwest wildlife is very interesting. I read the other day there's a mouse out there that eats scorpions, it's like a very carnivorous mouse that lives out there. And when he gets done eating a spider or he howls at the moon. And I'd never seen anything like it. I forget what his name was, but I love the Southwest for all that.
I don't know about that, but I know that there is a centipede out here that like will like eat some of the biggest scorpion we have. So I'm just like picturing like those like super cool badass battles at night going on between those like really big creature. I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Do you have rattlesnakes too?
Yeah, we have actually several species. Like there is many species of rattlesnake in Arizona.
And so when you go out there, you basically tuck your pants into your socks and make sure that, or you like make sure that you're wearing the right. Or did you have a close call with a rattlesnake before?
So it wasn't really a good close call, but I have actually a funny anecdote. So when I started grad school, I was like just coming, and I'd traveled very little, and that was my first time in Texas. And we were looking for a field site, and I didn't even speak English all that well, but like we were in like this like open shrub savanna, and nature was calling, so I had to go pee. And so I went behind a juniper and I opened my zipper and crashed down, and I realized between my legs was a juvenile rattlesnake. But it was cold. It was a winter. He hardly moved. Like I was nowhere near in danger to be bitten, but it was still funny that he was right there.
How did you feel afterwards? You thought, oh, geez.
I thought it was so cool. Like I was just excited. I took a picture of it. I was like,
don't got much of that in France.
No, we do have vipers, but no rattlesnake. But I like snakes, so like that's not something that scares me. I have no fear of them. I like respectfully like won't come too close, but no, really like them. I used to have snake as pet.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, the juveniles especially, they're not good with their venom, and so if they do bite you, they'll just give you all of it rather than the older ones. They just give you a little taste. So yeah, you got to watch your rear end when you're out there peeing in the forest.
Well, we have the Mojave rattlesnake, which is like one of the most venomous rattlesnake here in Arizona. So it's pretty cool. And like he has like, depending on the region, they either have like neurotoxic or like a different type of venom. It's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah. I did work in the marijuana fields of Northern California, and I slept on the ground and had a juvenile rattlesnake. Basically, was my roommate for a few months, and he did his thing, I did mine. We didn't bother each other. It was
also
all right.
That's great. At ASU, I'm hosted on like what's called Reptile Row. So like literally, my office, there's like a series of tank, and it's like several species of rattlers from Arizona, and like there's Gila monster and cool stuff like that. So I'm in good company.
Yeah. And you also had some experience in Pennsylvania, and for the first time ever, you came into contact with Amish people and their buggies. What was that like?
Well, I think when I grew up in France, I never pictured that I would like at 6 a.m. road rage behind a buggy, because I'm like, I'm in the Appalachian Valley, and like there's no way to pass that guy, and he's going so slow on his buggy, and I gotta go to like tend to my slug, because after 10 a.m. it's too late for the slugs. It's too hot. So yeah, that was happening. But otherwise, like good, like the most of the farmers I work with, like nearby, were Amish farms, and they were often very curious actually about like sort of like integrated pest management, because a lot of the Amish try to get the certification for organic farming.
Do they try to avoid using chemicals as part of their like religious outlook, or?
I don't know if it's part of the religious outlook. I'm not like I don't have knowledge about that, but because of like the way they farm, often like it's close to organic anyway. So like they try to get a certification so they can like, sell under the label organic.
Sure. Which is hot right now for the right reasons.
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of those organic veggies. They taste better, to tell you the truth.
I'm more of a proponent of local versus organic, but to each their own.
Or both. Both is even better. If I can grow it myself in the backyard, then it really tastes good, because I know what I put into it and stuff. Do you have any gardening experience, or did you ever, or is it just insects?
So it's funny. So I just like this month moved to a new house, and I can't wait to get some raised bed and start my own little veggie garden. I planted some plants in the front of the house like 2 days ago. I'm really excited to start. But before that, I was in an apartment, and I was traveling so much that like gardening wasn't really an option for me.
Well, I hopefully that you'll get to a point where when you're a young academic or when you're a student, it's like you just don't have the resources to do the stuff you want to do. But as I get older too, it's like we know what's the right thing to, and if you get pests, you'll know what to do.
I know, and I have a friend of mine who works at a worm farm. So I'm gonna get.
Do you know much about worms?
No, but I have a guy who is a worm farmer. So
that is so cool. Worms, earthworms. That's my spirit animal.
All right. Well, I can give you his contact. Like there's literally something called a worm farm here, and he works there.
That is so cool. I love it.
Yeah.
And the nitrogen that they give you and everything that they do, they're just sort of magical little creatures. Yeah.
They're pretty.
All right. Well, we'll end it there. We'll have you back. Invite you back later in the year. Figure out some new questions to ask you. But you are just an absolute treat. Marion Le Gall, Arizona State, nutritional ecology, professor, wonderful human being, all that. Anything you want to add before we go?
No, thank you. Have a great rest of your evening and enjoy some scotch.
Yeah. We'll talk after. Wave goodbye to everybody. See you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Bye.